All right. Welcome, everybody. It's Monday, June 6th, or maybe Tuesday, June 7th, depending on where you are in the time zones of the world. This is Jim Mansky with our open-hearted practice group. And I'm feeling energized and curious about what will unfold today.
And
Jori?
I'm Jori, the other half of this team that puts all this together. And I am delighted to see all of you who are here and glad you came to play with us today.
We are continuing what we started last week. NVC and Money, Part 2 is what our very creative title, NVC and Money, Part 2. And what we'll do is we'll do things pretty similarly to what we always do. In just a few minutes, we'll start with self-connection exercise, a chance for you to practice nonviolent communication just with yourself and kind of sharpen your self-empathy skills. Then we will have a chance for you to check in small groups, and we have a question or two that you can answer as you check in with each other today, if you'd like. And then we'll come back and have a lesson planned to continue our exploration of nonviolent communication and money, in hopes that we can all start planting seeds so that we can begin to change the money system that we all live in order to be more life affirming and to start dealing with some of the current problems that we have because of income equality and equity and so forth. So, people still arriving. I'm really glad that you are all here. Jori, did you want to do the self-connection exercise, or would you like me to do that and you do the groups?
Oh, I'm going to be a really lazy giraffe. I'm tired. You do it.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so for this exercise, I will kind of review, it'll also be a little bit of a review of these different stages of money maturity that we started covering last week. And so if you don't want to do this, that's perfectly fine. You can go and we'll be done in about 7 minutes or so, and or you can write in your journal or whatever you need to do. But if you want to play along with us, it'll be an opportunity for you to check in with your own relationship to money. So just start right where you are and just notice what you're doing right now. Maybe describe it for yourself. And then just let your eyes go wherever they want to go. Orient yourself to the space that you're in. This seems for many people to support them in kind of calming their nervous system, increasing your alertness, letting you know that you're in a safe place. We learn best when we know we're safe. And if you would like to just close your eyes and be with your body for a moment. And gonna do like a little thought experiment or a little a trip down memory lane about your own human experience. There was a time when you were first born. So just imagine what it might have been like for you to be a brand new human being born into the world, not having any language, not having any thought, not having any education so far, just this open, clear, present, and aware being. And no matter what your circumstances, you obviously survived your childhood and you're here. And during your childhood, you began to absorb messages from all kinds of places, from your parents, maybe your grandparents, maybe other caretakers, brothers and sisters, the educational system that you were involved in, maybe spiritual teachers or religious teachers. Lots of inputs that began to go in, and some of those inputs were about money. Some of them might have been very direct messages, little sayings that your caretakers might have said about money. Some of the messages might have been indirect, like the response that you got from your parents when, or your caretakers, when you asked for something as a child. What messages did you hear? And these early messages became like beliefs that we started to accumulate about money. So we began with innocence, not knowing anything. And then without any real choice, we started absorbing messages. And at some point, you became aware that you had less money than some, you and your family, and more money than others. That somehow there was a difference. And you might have experienced that as painful. There might have been other things that were painful about money. Maybe you really wanted something, but you didn't have the money to get it. Maybe you really needed something, but you didn't have the money to get it. And that can lead to needs unsatisfied, and that's painful. And yet you survived. You survived your childhood, and you took yourself with you and all these learnings that you had, and you grew into young adulthood, where you may or may not have began to accumulate knowledge about money. Maybe you started learning how to balance a checkbook, or maybe you learned your parents used a strategy like giving you a certain amount of money each week that you were responsible for spending. Or maybe you even started your own little business as a young teenager, or maybe you got your first job and you started to learn how money works in the world. You started accumulating knowledge. And then you began, if you continued your journey into money maturity, you began to understand more deeply the impact that money has in your life and in the lives of other people. You might have become aware of something like poverty, or something like really rich people. And you might have began to develop some understanding about what that might be like. It might have begun to awaken your empathy for how money and the lack of it or the abundance of it would have a difference for different people. You might have come to understand things in your own family about money just through the process of being a living, learning, breathing human being in relationship to other people who were working with money. You might have even began to develop compassion. Compassion for what it might be like to be in different circumstances than you're in. more connection to needs. And if you kept going in your awakening, your adulthood around money, you might have learned how to start cultivating your own vitality in order to have the energy, in order to ask for money and receive money. You might have begun working on physical energy, emotional energy, spiritual energy, because all of that kind of energy is required to reach any kind of a goal, financial or otherwise. And if you kept going, maybe this is what you're doing now, is you're moving into maturity, a deep quality of awakening. You might be getting in touch with your own vision about how you want to live in a world that has money in it. So now that you've accumulated this vigor, this physical, emotional, and spiritual energy, what are you going to do to support the health and welfare of your family, of your community? In other words, how can you give it forward? How can you take the abundance that you have and start using it to meet needs? Sometimes these choices we make might be profit oriented. Nothing wrong with making the profit. That's where you get the resources in order to continue your mission. Maybe some of your activities were also without profit, just pure volunteer service. And the final awakening is what here in Hawaii they call aloha. And this is an acknowledgement of our interdependence, that we can't get our needs met at another person's expense. We'll both pay. So we awaken into compassionate giving and receiving. We become ever more free from any limiting beliefs. And we get more and more deeply connected to our mission. How do we meaningfully want to serve life? There's just a compassionate flow of giving and receiving. We're not making deals anymore. And then as you look back at your own journey, you might see that it's not really a straight line. It's like a spiral. And we might dip into our innocence at various times. We might become aware of a limiting belief in terms of our own suffering. We might continue to gain knowledge about how we can use the resource of money more effectively in our life. Our understanding can come and go, as can our vigor. Our visions might change. Sometimes it may be easier to give and receive than other times. And then just imagine that from where you are right now, you can look at your life with an aura of self-acceptance, acknowledging for yourself that every moment of your life you've been doing the best you can with the information you had to get your needs met and to contribute to others. So hold yourself with appreciation that you're always doing the best you can. Even as you acknowledge that there's always more to learn. And in a few minutes, Jori is going to open up small groups.
And how long, Jim? Time?
Yeah, like normal, about 9 minutes plus 2. And
Okay.
the questions that might be interesting for you to answer after that self-connection exercise, I'll put them into the chat, and then I'll say them for the recording. Just introduce yourself with your name, maybe where you're calling from. And then how do you define money? What's your own definition of money? And then what does money mean to you? So the way these little small groups work is the person who's speaking is getting to practice what in nonviolent communication we call honesty. And we invite you to be exactly as honest as you're willing to be. You don't have to reveal anything that you don't want to reveal to anybody. You are a complete choice about what you say. And so you have the freedom to just pass or answer a different question if you prefer, and so forth. When you're not speaking, you're practicing empathy. And what we like to encourage during this first small group is that you just listen, no feedback. You just practice presence. Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of Nonviolent Communication, said that presence is the greatest gift that you can give to another human being. And like all gifts, you can't tell who's gaining the most, the giver or the receiver. So just practice silent presence. Okay, we'll see you all back here in about 10 minutes. If you don't want to be in a group, just stay here. Don't go, and then Jori can adjust the groups.
Fair enough. And for those of you who came in late, I'll put you in a room as fast as I can.
People are starting to come back here.
Mhm. Welcome back. Still coming back. Yeah, I'd love to hear from maybe 4 or 5 people about why you're here. What are your hopes for being here? Go ahead, Sudha.
Yeah, I don't know whether I'm answering your question, Jori, but I really wanted to talk about that first self-connection exercise that Jim, you took us through. It spanned my entire life. And it was so sweet for me because when you said go back to when you were a baby and your first impressions, in the span of maybe 4 or 5 or 10 seconds, I don't know how much, I went through my birthing process and I experienced the kindness of my mother. It was, I felt so much joy and there was such tenderness, and I'm tearing up even now when I think about that. And for me, that's amazing that in a span of say 5 or 7 minutes, I went through this whole panorama of my life. And I could touch base into each of those pointers that were being, for me, it's an exercise. It's a huge learning process. I thought the rest of the class or the rest of the session is, well, it is what it is. So I'm really celebrating my needs for deep self-connection. I'm very thankful.
Oh, I'm so
Yeah,
glad to hear it.
I guess that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sudha. For those of you who don't know, Sudha is a certified trainer, actually. Lovely to have you on board. You had something you wanted to say, Jim?
Nope, I was just taking it in. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have anything else they'd like to share? We're particularly about the topic, but if there's something else, you're welcome to take a moment or two to share it as well.
Yeah, Rena.
Then I'll shout at once.
Go ahead, Rena.
I think you did connect us to our parents through the exercise, Jim. And I'm I'm also celebrating the learning around money from my parents as a openness and shared resource. As I saw money, sometimes as children you don't see money. And I saw money and it was flowing from one hand to another, with my parents' hand flowing outwards in the world. So I think money flowing outwards in the world, especially to humble people as we traveled, usually you pay tips as okay, you do this for me and I'll pay you 10%. But my father would just give something before anyone did anything, and not as manipulation, but just as thank you. I learned that later.
That's beautiful. You actually had the experience of not being transactional, but
Yeah,
rather just to
yeah,
be able to give from the heart. Yeah, that's
yes,
the world I want to live in. That's what we try and support here.
yeah.
Thank you, Rena. And Aviva?
Okay, sorry. Did you mean to comment only on how our parents like treated us with regards to money, or?
No, actually, I was just, why are you here? Or maybe how you define money, if you'd like, or what it means to you. Something
Oh,
along the line, either why you're present or something along the lines of what Jim shared so far.
well, I like the class and it's good practice. So that's why I'm here. And actually, I guess a spiritual mentor taught me about NVC like 25 years ago. And I always intended to take a class, but it took a while. But I do just want to say this, I guess I will say this about money, is that so I had an unusual experience where we grew up in a very affluent neighborhood, and then we went bankrupt and sold our house and moved into a small apartment when I was a teenager. So I had like multiple lifetimes of relationship with money, and it is still hurting me, and it is still and there's both this sadness where there's not many people that I can talk to that have sort of had a similar experience. Most people have been in like one experience, and then it repeats itself, is what I find, either poverty or wealth. I haven't found a lot of, anyway. But the other thing is, I feel like if I can think about money just as a need, and a need that needs to get met, like, then maybe that will be easier for me to digest than all the other stories in my head about it. So that's part of also what I'm here for, is I just want to keep thinking about it as a need.
That's interesting. Well, when we talk about money, we talk about it as a strategy to meet needs.
Yeah, we'll go deeper into that through the.
Yeah, we can go a little further later.
Then it'll be interesting to check in with you, especially at the end, and see how you integrate what we covered today. I'm so curious. Thank you, Aviva.
Thank you, Aviva. And then Rob, and then Siva, and then we'll move on into the other parts of the group.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to sign up for the NVC Saturday course, 4 sessions, and I think help learning to lead a group, something like that. And I took for granted it was going to be by donation, but there was a set price, and I was like, what? And I feel very cheap often. I don't know if it's my own self-worth about spending money, or I get into indecisive place. And I found that with that class. I also had a conflicting class as well. So, but sort of why I didn't take it. But so I'm just interested. So not all of NVC, like CNVC, it has set prices for things. It's not an exchange kind of a, right?
Right. I mean, as we there'll be one more part of this class, by the way. Today is part 2 of 3. We decided to add one more piece. And in the final class, we'll work on the distinction between vision and aloha, the final stages of money maturity. And it's through that understanding when I really got the difference between those two levels that I came to have a lot more compassion for people who might have a fixed price for a particular thing. And different trainers are in different situations in their unfolding, not only in their business life, but in their own sustainability, but we're all awakening in our own consciousness towards a deeper and deeper experience of interdependence, aloha. So yeah, I don't have a sense that there's anything wrong with charging money. Although I like the word offer or request better than charge. I don't want to get too hung up in the words. How do you feel hearing that, Rob?
Yeah, thank you. Just one other thing. I belong still to a spiritual group, and they have a thought that you want to charge quite a bit for courses because then people think it's worth that much. So just a totally different way of thinking about things. So, but thank you.
It's true. Like on our NVC Academy course, we've been doing it for about 15 years now, and we always do it for free. And on a typical, you've been there, I believe, on this. It's always the 4th Saturday of the month. Typically, we have between 20 and 30 people that come to that class. Guess how many people are signed up for the class? 2,114 are registered. Right? So
oh my God.
that's less than 1/10% that actually generally show up. So that's the cost, so to speak, of giving something away. If we charge, I know that when Sarah Payton does a class, she might have a charge of, I don't know what Sarah charges for her classes, what she requests. Let's say she requests $350. She might have 100 people show up for that, and every single one person that paid the $350, they show up. They're much more likely to show up because then they're more invested in it. So I can see how it can go either way.
And I'd like to also add this piece around just from the perspective of the person who is offering a service or whatever. I come from a perspective of ask for what you want and then take what you get. It's just a request. And on the other end, when someone does make that request, you have an opportunity with many to just have a dialogue about it or make a counter proposal. So instead of money seeming like it's, a wall that you have to walk into or with a door to walk through or whatever, it's just a request. And you might find out the person who made it is very attached, but often not.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Siva?
So there's a couple things that I want to add. One is that in thinking about a number, whatever you think about one number, you might think about your age, you might think about just any number, but no number has a meaning unless it's in comparison with another number. So no number stands alone in terms of its meaning, and money is some kind of a number. That's one perspective.
Yeah, the way we say it is, we give the world all the meaning it has for us. It's a number, yeah, and we give it meaning.
Yes, we give it meaning by putting a number label. The other point of view that I like to think about is money is only information. It's just data. It's what you add to that data that makes it meaningful. I'm done.
Thank you, Siva. That's a perfect segue because we're going to talk a little bit about data in just a moment. But let me just share my screen. Some of you, as I look at the screen, I see that some of you weren't here last week. So I'm just going to briefly review a little bit of what we did last week. And last week we framed our exploration of money through a particular model that was developed by a man named George Kinder. And he wrote a book called 7 Stages of Money Maturity. And if you were here for the self-connection exercise, this was the process that I guided you through in your own direct experience. But so now I'll teach to your left brain for just a second that we all start our journey with money completely as blank slates. As far as we can tell, children are not born with any kind of programming. We don't arrive pre-educated. We arrive just completely open, completely innocent. So, and we don't have any choice as little babies about what comes into our brains. We just absorb, and we move towards that which we're interested in. So if you gave a kid, a little baby, a 3-month-old baby, you gave him a $100 bill, what the baby is likely to do is stick it in its mouth, because that's what babies do to objects. They stick it in their mouth because they're trying to learn what it is. That comes from innocence. And so in that stage of innocence, we're just absorbing not only any data that we're collecting from the objects that we interact with, but we're also receiving the values and beliefs of the people in the media that we're connected to. And some of these messages are quite direct. Like my parents had certain sayings around money. Like my dad once said that it was a dog eat dog world. And I left that wasn't directly about money, but it was close enough. I left him, I was 10 years old when he said that. And I immediately went into pain and suffering. I went to my room and cried because he broke my heart to think that I was born into a dog eat dog world. And so the consequence of all that programming that we took in is eventually we bump up against reality. We learn that there's just something called poverty. We learn that we have more money than others have less money. And it doesn't feel fair. And it seems unnecessary to have such a vast gulf between us. When I was a small child in China, there were 800 million people living in poverty. And it's only in the last 20 years since I became an adult that China has managed to support almost 1 billion people in moving from $1 a day. And that's remarkable. And that came from the use of knowledge. So that's the third stage is how can we use what we know about money and money systems in order to gain some sense of mastery over this resource that we have available to us. And as we continue, so that kind of feeds the left-hand brain, the left side of our brain with knowledge, data, and so forth. And then the other part of adulthood is awakening the whole brain, which relates to understanding, empathy, in other words. Marshall defined empathy as a respectful understanding of another person's experience. So now we get to see we might empathize with ourselves and our relationship to money, might empathize with how money and its absence or presence impacts others, but not from a realm of moral judgment, but from a realm of value judgments. This has the effect of awakening compassion. We naturally want to move towards contributing to make life more wonderful for everybody. And in order to do that, the final stage of adulthood is, Jory, can you make sure everybody's muted, please? In order to navigate the final stage of adulthood, we need vigor. We do a class on that about, maybe once or twice a year called Cultivating Vitality. where we really focus on how, through the process of connecting more deeply with our own needs, we can begin to develop strategies to support our own physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And then the final stage of money maturity is awakening. And there's two stages to that: vision and aloha. And we'll be covering those in more detail in a couple of weeks. So today we're going to focus on adulthood, knowledge, understanding, compassion, and vigor, focusing primarily on the knowledge piece today, because this is not something you would normally get in an NVC class. And yet, without a little bit of knowledge, we're not going to get very far in towards our own money maturity and towards creating a relationship with money that meets more needs with less cost. So I just want to pause here and see if there's any questions or comments about what we've covered in that brief overview. Yeah, Ellen.
So as I began to learn nonviolent communication, I had to learn a vocabulary and concepts. And this is also completely like another world for me to deal with, like energy exchange and all that stuff. How do we find the vocabulary and the concepts and the dynamics to even verbalize to another person, not to change them, but to allow them to be open to something different too?
Yeah, beautiful questions to ask. I think that learning a vocabulary to talk about any skill set is an essential part. You can't talk about NVC without talking about observations, feelings, needs, and requests, and knowing what that is. And you can't talk about money without some other basic concepts, and we'll cover a few of them today. You don't need that many. It's kind of like NVC. It can actually be kind of simple and elegant if you just focus on the basics. And so that's the idea here today, is to just kind of focus on the basics. So first, let's just define what we mean by knowledge in terms of NVC and money. So share my screen and put this little screen up for you. Basically, this relates to the NVC skill set around, I see your hand up, Aviva. Let me just say this little piece and I'll come to you. That this relates to the observation piece of nonviolent communication primarily. So we're going to learn and gain more skill in being able to make observations about our own financial state of well-being, and perhaps the financial state of well-being of our family, our community, the organizations that we are connected to that might be focused on social change and so forth. But unless we have kind of some common understanding of what observations are important, then we're not going to get very far in terms of being able to meet our social change goals. Go ahead, Aviva. What's your question or comment?
Okay, I'm going to try to say this in an NVC way. I notice that there's a lot of words on that chart. I think that they sound nice. I feel that they're completely unrealistic to the topic of money. And I would request that we ask questions like, how do we have a healthier relationship with money? And then define what healthy means, and have that be the premise of the conversation around money. Because the truth is, I could have knowledge and say, oh, I have multiple degrees and I noticed that I don't have any money. And I noticed that I'm living in a rent controlled apartment. And I noticed that I have to, when I go in the grocery store, I can't get whatever I want. I try to be strategic. Like, I could have that knowledge, but it doesn't lead me to a better relationship with money unless I specifically make that request of myself.
Absolutely.
And I could have vision and see the whole, like, oh, there's a gap in the middle class and the poor and the rich. And I could see the whole thing, and I still don't have a healthy relationship with money unless I'm going in that direction. And I actually don't even believe, this is kind of radical, weird thing to say, but I don't think we need empathy to make money. I don't think we need caring. I know people that have money, they have no empathy. I know people that even give charitable contributions when they're required to by Jewish law, and they may not have a ton of empathy, but they're doing it because they feel like they're supposed to. So I'm even curious about the value-based things here, in addition to the knowledge and the vision and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm so grateful for you all and putting forth this class, but I'm just feeling that bubble up in me.
I'm glad you mentioned it. I'm glad you mentioned it. If it's alive in you, it's probably alive in others, Aviva. And the whole point of the series for me is to support people in creating that healthy relationship with money. What does it look like for you? Not my idea of what's healthy for you, but what's your idea? How are you going to change or embrace your relationship with money so that it really contributes to your well-being and the well-being of people that you care about? So that's exactly what we're aiming to do with this. So let's keep going unless there's anything else. Okay, so let's learn vocabulary that might help us to navigate this with more skill. I seem to be having a little computer problems here. You guys,
Jim, you might need to shut off your video, and maybe your voice will come in more clearly.
okay, I'll try that. It seems like there's a little internet congestion or something. So, oops. Things are really slow internet-wise here. Okay, so we keep going. So, if I were to say to you, how much money did you spend last year on entertainment? Would anybody be able to give an answer to that question? Probably not. Or if I asked you how much money did you spend on rent last year? That might be a little bit easier because it's one big chunk and it's probably probably more predictable than entertainment. Or if I asked you, but you could take any category of money and ask most people how much they give to fulfill the needs associated with that particular category, and most people don't have an answer. They don't have access to the answer. So that's an important piece of knowledge that is probably missing for most people, and it's got an easy fix. The easy fix is, and it's a little bit of a painful fix, but Jori and I did this for almost 40 years, but you keep track of everything that you spend. Back when Jori and I first began our relationship, we had a little notebook and we wrote down, we weren't poor by most world standards. We had a car, but we didn't have jobs. We were like hippies, just kind of traveling around, and money was tight. We didn't really have very much income, and we had a little bit of savings that we were working off of. So it was very important to us to keep track of our money because we wanted to be able to pull this off for as long as possible. So we just started writing down everything that we spent. And that habit continued for, like I said, almost 40 years. We just stopped a few years ago when we finally retired. And so that's the number one recommendation I have, is to start tracking how much money you spend on everything. And over the course of time, you will begin to have clarity of the observation of what's going on from now on. So that's one really important piece of knowledge that you can start gaining. Second piece of knowledge would be to do some research into your own life and discover how much money have you received in your life through work or luck or inheritance or dowry or whatever. There's lots of different sources of income. I would recommend that you make a list, and I'll give you some resources at the end, like some little spreadsheets that you can use to do these things, and write down how much you made in each year of your earning life, and then total it up at the end, and then watch what happens when you get that observation. Pay attention to the feelings and needs that come alive in you when you get clear on how much money you have received.
You know, it may sound like it's a lot of work, or you wonder, why would I bother doing this? And my experience was that it transformed my relationship to not only money, but my sense of security. That I actually knew what we were doing, as opposed to just kind of going along and sort of frivolously worrying about where we are. And the capacity to really make that choice and to know really what's happening is enlightening, actually.
Yep. Yep. Very clarifying, I think, for both of us. And sometimes it was just a pain. And sometimes I didn't want to do it. I mean, we literally wrote down everything, right down to the penny. And then we would total it up. And it just created so much clarity for us. Okay, things seem to be kind of stabilizing a little bit. Internet.
Yeah, hopefully this will work. If it's a problem, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it.
Okay, so then the third piece of knowledge that you probably don't have involves understanding three concepts that maybe you've heard of and maybe you haven't. But the first concept is an asset. I'll put it in the chat. I could spell it right. An asset. An asset is something that you own that has some kind of value. So if you, like, let's say that, okay, so here's an asset. I have a book that I actually bought, my own book. And so some people would do anything to get their publication numbers higher. Anyway, I bought my own book, and so it's an asset for me because it has a financial worth to it. It's probably worth about $1 now that it's been used. So I might be able to sell it on the used market for $1, but it's still an asset because it has value. So I could sell it if I needed to. Other things that you might have as assets are, you might have some jewelry that maybe you got as part of an inheritance or that you collected along the way. You might have a car. Some people have cars. Some people have houses. Some people have things that they collect, and so forth. All those are assets. Anything that you could turn into cash is an asset. Then the second concept is debt. Debt's the opposite of an asset. Debt is, so some people are putting some things in the chat that I would consider as an asset, but they're not an asset, a financial asset, like intelligence. I can't sell my intelligence. If anybody would really buy it, I kind of doubt it. But if anybody did, I can't really sell it because it's actually an inherent part of me. But I could sell my book, which is an expression of my intelligence. So having a copyright on a book, that is an asset. I have a contract with the publisher.
Yeah, and we're talking about specifically financial assets here is what Jim's talking about. Yes, there are all kinds of assets that we have in terms of our own being and skills.
Right. And then the second concept is debt. So debt is a number that represents how much money you borrowed that you haven't yet paid back. So if you have a mortgage on a house, that's a debt. If you have a car payment, that's a debt. If you have a student loan, that's a debt. A credit card bill, a debt. Okay, so on one hand, you've got all the things that represent cash if you sold it. And on the other hand, you've got all the money that you've already promised to give to somebody else. Okay, so then if you take the debts and you subtract them from the assets, what's left over is called your net worth. Terrible, violent word, in my opinion, because it makes it sound like it's something about you, but it's something that you have, not something that you are. You have a net worth. You are not a net worth, but it's just something that you have. Why does it matter what you have? Because you probably underneath, and this goes to the consciousness piece of Eva, you probably want to know how much is enough. So when you have these pieces of information that we've talked about so far, you know the current state of what your net worth is, plus you know what your projected expenses are from now on, because chances are if you spent $3,000, somebody put $3,000 about one of the questions in the chat, $3,000 is how much you always spend on entertainment, then you can pretty much guess, unless you change your behavior, that you'll be spending that money next year and the year after and the year after. So you can start to make predictions on what is enough. And if you do the little project to figure out how much you've earned, that gives you an observation about your past. And it shows you how powerful you are, that you have probably accumulated and spent a pretty remarkable amount of money in your lifetime. Otherwise, you wouldn't probably be able to afford the internet and so forth, that you're able to have a call like this. So these three pieces of data help you to start moving towards answering the question, how much is enough? Then that kind of begs the question, enough for what? And the answer that was important for Jori and me to answer in 1985, 86, somewhere around that age, is what is enough money for us to have as a net worth so we can stop working for wages and instead work for service? So how much money would we need to have in the bank, so to speak, as assets that would give us the freedom to do that which we most want to do, which is serve the world? So it might take you a few weeks, months, a year, what period of time is really up to how much energy you have, how much vigor you have to answer these questions. How much have you earned? How much do you spend? And what's your net worth? Once you got those three pieces of information, then you can start asking the question, how much is enough? And from then, when we come back in a couple of weeks, we'll start talking about vision, and we'll start developing a vision plan so you figure out how to get enough. You don't have enough yet, otherwise you wouldn't be in this class. You'd probably be out serving the world in another way. The only reason that Jori and I can do this, the way that we do it, is because we worked really, really hard for about 7.5 years. Just to give you just a little flavor of what our life was like, In 1981, December 1981, Jory and I had our first child. And we didn't have a house. We were renting a house. And we might have had a little bit of money in the bank. I think we might have had a car. I think we had an old beat up VW bus. I mean, we were really hippies, man. This was like 1980, 81, right? And so we're really living the hippie lifestyle. And then we suddenly had a baby. And now babies are expensive. It costs $10,000 to give birth to that child because Jory had a C-section. We didn't have $10,000. So now suddenly we have zero assets and $10,000 worth of debt. Okay, so that's it. And so we didn't have, and we had a little bit of savings left over. We worked out a payment plan with the hospital and so forth. And then we started working on a plan. And then that plan including getting state support. Jory and I got food stamps for a while. And so we, in the United States, at the time anyway, had a pretty good social safety net. We also had some non-tangible assets called Jory's mom, and who gave us a loan. No bank would. We went into the bank. Jory finally got me to get a job so we could get off of food stamps. And I
actually said to him, I wanted him to go out and support us in a manner to which I'd like to be accustomed.
Yes.
That was the direct quote.
And I didn't want to work.
Because I was the breadwinner until we had children.
Yeah.
Because I was out there before I met him as a lecturer, and I had my own business, but then I was a mother.
Yeah. And so now it's all on me. It's all on me, right? And so all this cultural programming kicks in, all this duty and obligation stuff. So I don't really want to work. I'd much rather stay home and play with my new baby, but we had bills to pay. Now we had a monthly bill for the hospital and so forth. So I got a job, and then one thing led to the other, and we were able to borrow money from Jory's mom and actually buy the business that I was employed by. And then we worked our plan for 7.5 years. And so this plan ended in 1992. We sold our business, and we have never worked for money again since. We work only out of joy. But it took us took us really 10 years to get there, because we had some years of intentional poverty that we were also working off there. So this is not an easy fix. If you want an easy fix and you find one, please let me know, because I'd like to share it with other people. As far as I can tell, it's hard work, and it takes some luck to navigate the system. We were very lucky in that we had Jory's mom to support us long enough in order till we could actually qualify for a real bank loan.
And it's not just luck. Yes, you can find some luck along the way, but it's the willingness to put one foot in front of the other, to be clear on what your mission is, and then to determine what's the strategy you will use, and then commit yourself to it. I think I don't know if you said this, I think our plan was like a 3-year plan, no, maybe a 5-year plan. It took 2 more years after. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but we actually had it planned out. And then of course life unfolded, and we found out how long it really took to build this business up and then to be able to sell it.
And we didn't do it alone. We actually had a practice group. We were working off one of the resources I told you about last week was a book called Your Money or Your Life by Joe Dominguez and Vicki Robin. And Joe created a financial integrity course, which I'll give you the link to at the end of today. Unfortunately, it's down off the internet, but you can still get access through the Wayback Machine. But we followed that plan. And we were able to, over that 8-year period of time, with the support of a practice group, we were calling each other to accountability. We were setting goals and doing all the things you can do in a practice group. And so it was really an expression of kind of getting clear on what we wanted and getting community support in order to move towards our goal. Okay, Siva, I'd like to do small groups so people can talk about what they've learned so far. Is there something that's burning in you right now, Siva, or could it wait till we get back from small groups?
She put her hand down, sweetie.
Okay, I see you put your hand down. Great. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to small groups, Jori, for 15 minutes.
Okay. Let's see.
And here's what you do in the small group. Talk a little bit, not about specifics, but just in general, what's enough for you? How will you know what is enough? So that would be the first question to discover. And then what's the cost to you of not knowing what is enough? I put it in the chat. If you don't have the knowledge of what is enough, what's the cost to you? So you can have this as a needs-based discussion. And yes, Janet says, what about inflation? Yeah, that's something you have. If you don't know what inflation means, then you'd have to get that piece of knowledge too. You know, right now inflation is running at a higher rate than normal because of than what's normal, at least lately in the United States, since the late 80s, since the 80s. And so things have changed now. So we have to, that becomes a new factor in trying to accommodate what is enough. Now gas is $8 a gallon. A few months ago, it was $5 a gallon or whatever it was. So that's inflation. So for 15 minutes, you're going to talk about what comes up for you about what's enough for you to get the level of financial freedom that you would like to have. So you have choice. Maybe you already have enough. How did you know you had it? And then if there's time for a second round, what's the cost of not knowing what is enough? Okay, we'll do this for 15 minutes. Everybody should have about 5 minutes per person. And we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. Ta-da! Any reflections or comments from anybody? What'd you learn? You can raise your hand or put something in the chat. I've been keeping track of the chat very well yet today. A little bit. Go ahead, Maida. Is that how you say your name, Maida?
Maida, yeah. Just that there's a lot to work out.
Yes.
Lots of research to do.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. This accumulating knowledge is takes energy and time, other resources. Yeah. Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you. In our group with Alice and Jeanette, I learned how money and what's the value of money is changes over your age. So for someone older than me who is retired, money can mean peace and comfort, something that is that you can buy somebody else to clean up your windows for you, to do your gardening for you, things that you would not have spent money on before, but that means comfort now. So for me, in response to your question about what is the cost of not knowing what's enough, it's perennial, that sense of not knowing. It's that uncertainty that remains.
Yeah.
And it is that discomfort. But at the same time, having heard yours and Jori's story on how you've done this so many years ago, I wondered, how come I don't do that? And I wonder if there is anything cultural behind it. I would rather not know, kind of, because this is beside my control. Money fluctuates on, and then as long as I'm not depleted it's okay not to know. I
Yeah.
think my husband, who is also very calculating, who is very good and pragmatic, doesn't seem to know either. So we are never planning.
Yeah.
And it's a painful task that I will have.
I'm with you. I have a similar sense. And I think it is cultural, but not just Korean culture or American culture. I think it's the world culture that we have been conditioned to actually disconnect from our needs and to never think that there could be such a thing as enough. We've given up on the idea of enough. I just hear it from so many people that there's just kind of despair that they could ever have enough. And then sometimes people make a decision. Like in the United States, as one of the consequences of the pandemic was a lot of people left jobs that were not meeting their needs. And they created their own businesses, or they scaled down their lifestyle, or they just got off of the accumulation hamster wheel. You know, you know what a hamster wheel is. Those little furry animals, and they're like little pets for kids, and they don't have much to do, so you give them a little wheel to walk around on, and all they do is walk on that wheel. And that is the financial life that many of us have been conditioned into growing into, or not growing into living into, where we think that we have to get the next, fill in the blank, whatever the next craze is, the new kind of clothing, the new car, the new this, the new that. So we accumulate, and the process of accumulation creates debt, which means that then we have debt, we are renting money. And so now some of the money that we're gaining from our giving our life energy is going to pay rent on money. And so it creates this perpetual cycle that can sadly end in bankruptcy for a lot of people, and so forth, starting all over. And anyway, I have a lot of sadness about this. Go ahead, Dan, and then Ellen. Go ahead, Dan.
What I wonder is, I've heard that we don't have a need for money, and in Marshall's work. And so I wonder if I can move that forward into this question and suggest that, well, enough could be zero in a sense.
Right. Yeah. It depends on your environment. We have lots of needs that are met with money. But just to be clear that money itself is a strategy.
Money is a way to contribute to other needs. And so I heard this definition, Joe Dominguez definition of money, I thought was interesting as I was researching for this class. Joe defined money as something that I exchanged my life energy for. And then once I have this money, now I have some choice about what I do with this money. And so, so one of the needs that really comes alive in me when it comes to money is freedom. I have if I don't have, during that period of time when Jori and I didn't have much money, I had the experience that we didn't have much freedom. We couldn't go to the movies. We couldn't couldn't have anything that looked like fun. Going out to dinner, forget about it. It was like going to the co-op and clipping coupons and growing our own food. And so we actually learned some great value lessons there that I don't know that whether the number is zero or not. We came up with a different number. Everybody's going to come up with their own number. But you're right, Dan. Money is not a need. It's a strategy in order to contribute to needs. And so that's part of what we encourage you to work on is, what does enough mean to you, and enough to do what? And Ellen, you mentioned in the chat this is a charged topic. What's up for you about it?
For me, my belongings have a meaning for me, and they keep me tethered on this earth. And there's another side of that coin that says I am not allowed. And I just wanted to say, when I did have money and then I ended up having to work 2 jobs, single and trying not to spread, anyway, a long story. I found that I was trying to fill a hole that never got filled for connection. As uncomfortable as this Zoom meeting can be sometimes for me, I feel like I've met more authenticity and satisfaction. I feel a clench in my stomach when I talk. I still do it. I still show up. Sometimes I can't because I just can't. But it has filled for me a need that was a big, deep, cavernous, bottomless hole of black. And I believe in personal villages. I believe in people connected to each other, whether they agreed or disagreed about something, and not polarized about it, but just say, I agree to disagree with you, but let's go on our walk together.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So that's what this has brought up for me as being a very charged subject. I feel kind of wobbly right now, but I have my cat in my lap and my dog's at my feet, so I'll be fine.
You got your village. You got your village. You got your community. Your friends are there to keep you warm and accompanied. Yeah. And Cecile.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. In my group, we talked about the feeling of scarcity, and I was wondering whether enough would be when I get rid of this feeling. And we were asking ourselves, is it sometimes enough, or we have never enough? Yeah. And like many of you, I came up with the needs of freedom, of course, and also security, choice, peace of mind, comfort. Yeah, so the question is, what about this deep-rooted feeling of scarcity I inherited from my parents and many others, probably?
Yeah. Yeah. That's innocence plus pain and suffering. We got that scarcity out of no choice. And I think it's a world culture problem, not just Cecile or Jim or Jori or any of us, that the world culture has conditioned us to think that there's not enough, that you're not enough. And NVC and things like it are about unpacking that and seeing that it's actually the shift from scarcity to abundance is possible. It won't happen through magical thinking. It happens actually from putting one foot in front of the other. And that's what this class is designed to stimulate, is at least some beginning steps in order to create the life that you most want to lead. Okay, so one more, and then I've got one more little exercise before we do a checkout. Go ahead, Siva.
You wanted to add to what you said, rather than worrying about the negative, you forget about the negative and focus on the abundance, and focusing to pay attention to abundance is to bring gratitude, awareness, and then gratitude into your practice.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, Siva. That's like the number one strategy for beginning to shift from scarcity to abundance, is to notice the needs of ours that are met from moment to moment.
Thank you. And I would also like to comment on this premise that we don't need money is coming from a point of privilege. And that's both true and false. If we're saying that only the people who have money have privilege, then that is not a match for what my experience is. Money is really a valuable resource. It creates a lot of ease. And human beings didn't create money early on. There wasn't money. There was just exchange of things. Yes, we have a culture of money now. And I live on an island where I know there are people here that don't have money who are actually thriving because they live off the land and they manage to get what they need through interactions with other people. So I just wanted to be really clear about that. I think I'm incredibly challenged to think about what it would be like to live without money, given the quality of life that I have and that I want. But what's really important here is to make the distinction between a need and a strategy. Money is not a need. It is a strategy to meet needs. So that's just a really important distinction I wanted to make sure got through.
Yeah.
And I'm open, Aviva, to a further conversation about this toward the end of at the end of the class. But it's just, I just needed to be heard. Thank you.
Thanks, Jori. So one last little thing to think about for the next couple of weeks till we get to see you again, because we're going to take next week off. We're going to be at the Los Angeles IIT. And so there'll be a guest trainer. We'll tell you about that in a few minutes. But has anybody here heard of a Gazingas pin? I'm going to put it into the chat. A Gazingas pin. Anybody? Okay, so here's a new word to learn. It probably is not in the dictionary, by the way. But I learned this concept from Joe Dominguez in his course. And a Gazingas pin, you probably know somebody that collects Gazingas pins. You might even collect them. But a Gazingas pin, like in Albuquerque where we used to live, we would have a balloon fiesta every year. And this is the largest balloon fiesta in the world, where people would come and fly their hot air balloons. And it's a pretty cool event. But every year they would make a new pin that would have a picture of a balloon on it and the date, like 1994 or whatever. And so those little pins, they would sell them every year for a couple bucks, made out of metal with an enamel coating. And those are Gazingas pins. They have absolutely no value whatsoever other than the fun of collecting them, and they cost money. And so a Gazingas pin is a metaphor for the things that you give money for that don't contribute to your needs. Now, if you're a passionate Gazingas pin collector, you know it's like your life mission is to go to every balloon fiesta in the world and collect pins, and that's what gives you meaning and purpose. Then it's not a Gazingas pin for you. A Gazingas pin for me would be I was in the habit, and I'm freeing myself from the habit of collecting. Well, at one point it was beer cans. So when I was a young man, and I finally got old enough to drink, I kind of started collecting beer cans, and I would spend more money than I would always try to find the can that I didn't have. And I buy a whole 6-pack, of course, because you have to drink it to see what it's like. And, so this was like totally, it didn't contribute in any way other than a little bit of fun community with people. And it ended up, then when we moved to Hawaii, did we take my beer can collection? Of course not. It was the first thing that went to the recycling bin, 1,000 cans. So obviously they had no value. So what's the Gazingas pin in your life? That's the question to think about. What are you using your life energy? You're exchanging your life energy for Gazingas pins. And if you create some knowledge about what your Gazingas pins are, then you can generate more choice. So for me, I don't collect beer cans anymore. I take some of that money and I give it away to people because it's more fun to create scholarships for IITs or other events than it is to collect stuff. I don't want any more stuff. Please come to Hawaii, go to our garage and pick anything out there out of our garage that we don't, please take it off our hands. We got too much stuff.
Not the car, though, not the car.
Within reason, yes. We think we need a car. But we don't have two. We used to. I think there was a time in our life when we had 3 cars. Now that's a big gazinga spin for a lot of Americans, is extra cars. I mean, Jay Leno, the comedian, I think he's got something like 40 cars or 400 cars, or that's a definite gazinga spin. Just think how many people could be fed with the money from those cars, right? So what's your gazinga spin? What would represent some found money for you? And so my friend River, who's also a certified trainer, he has his anti-gazinga spin strategy. I wanted to share with you is, he'll be sucked in by some kind of an ad. He's reading some web page, and ad will pop up for a gazinga spin of one sort or another, and it'll start generating desire. I want that thing. And River taught me to never buy on impulse, to always wait at least 24 hours before buying a gazinga spin. And in that 24 hours, you've got time to disconnect the dopamine system in your brain and reconnect to your executive function, to your big brain up here, to see, is this really going to meet my needs or not? Give yourself 24 hours before you buy a gazinga spin. If it still brings you joy, then buy it and enjoy it. If you're doing it, it must be meeting some needs. Well, that's so that's a little bit of that's something that somebody put in the chat. If you are doing it, it must be meeting some needs. So that's I would tweak it just slightly. What I understand from this principle of NVC is everything we do is in the service of meeting a need, which is different than everything we do meets a need. Believe me, I have lots of behaviors that don't meet anybody's needs, including my own, right? Every time I might have a behavior called criticizing my sweetheart. And I'm doing that to try to meet a need. It's almost guaranteed not to meet my need. So that's a very important distinction, that our behaviors have the intention to contribute to a need, but that doesn't mean that it fulfills the intention. Okay, let's see here, Jeanette, and then we'll do our end of the call commercials.
I find this topic fascinating because I just came back from Portugal, where there are like thousands of monasteries that have been closed down in the 1800s. And people lived in many of them, like the Templars, Knight Templars, for 900 years before there was money, exactly. And I have to remember that needs and wants are 2 separate things. And wants can be a habit, like my internet, my Google internet is a habit. It's not a need, it's a want. And I find on a spiritual level, if we, I guess at different stages of life, to me, what is enough is we don't know how long we're going to live. And what are we going to do at the end when, like traveling, you want to spend all that currency because it's not good anywhere else unless you lose money trading it back. Well, it's the same thing on planet Earth. The other direction, we have means, most everyone in this culture, and what do we do with it? Because it's probably more than enough. And those monasteries really helped me see the value of community and food and connection and creativity. And they turn a lot of them into hotels where you're in cells, you're in the monk cells, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I could live like that. So, and I know not everybody could, but I find that very interesting. So thank you for this topic.
You're very welcome, Jen. I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you had that experience. Yeah. So the first links in the chat are some support for your knowledge. So I'll just leave it for you to explore them if you would like to. The first one is a web archive created by Vicki Robin for the financial integrity course. That's the course that Jori and I did starting back in 1985 or 86, somewhere in that range. So it's been around for a long time, very, very tested, and full of information. And then there's some tools. Most of this is kind of attuned to a US audience, of course, because that's the searches that come up for me, but there are probably some tools available in other cultures that would use your form of money and so forth. And then the third link is just an interesting article about why we make decisions around money, like buying Gazingas pins, and kind of guiding us into being a little slower before we make financial-based decisions. It's related to a TED Talk by Dan Gilbert that I would recommend that you tune into. So because of our good fortune and hard work, we're able to give away our practice group on a gift economy basis. And our request is that you help other trainers and us continue to do our work by giving generously to the Center for Nonviolent Communication. If you're an American citizen and taxpayer, then any money that you give them, you can check with your tax professional to see if it's tax deductible for you. Second link.
And we do appreciate if you let us know. If you would send us a text or an email to let us know, because it impacts us in terms of our donations to the Center for Nonviolent Communication.
Yeah.
We actually get some credit for that.
And then the second link that I just put in, Radical Compassion, that's our old website. I keep meaning to update the link, but this link still works. That's if you want to give money directly to Jim and Jori, and then we will pay it forward. We will give it forward to an NVC project that we're passionate about, like IIT scholarships, especially for folks in the global South who could not otherwise afford NVC training. That's one of our passions.
And some people, it's helpful to give us the money and then rather than for you to donate to where you would like to, but then you can tell us where you would like us to donate it.
Yes, exactly. Like, let's say that you're in India and you wanted to express your appreciation for this practice group, then please contact Sudha, who's often on this call. She was here today, and she has, along with some friends, started the India Trust for Nonviolent Communication. They would love to have some extra money in order to fulfill their mission of training the next generation of trainers. So if that's where you want to give your money, please do it that way, and just let us know you did it so we can celebrate it with you.
So to just put her a heart on there. She's on the bottom left of the screen in case anybody wants to see her in her glee.
And finally, I'd love it if you would buy my book. I'm very grateful for all the people that have bought it so far. If you haven't bought it yet, then there's lots of ways that you can get it. My favorite way is for you to get it from your local library.
I think you mean, you mean the bookstore or library?
My favorite is the library, because then if you get your library, if your library says we don't have that book, then you can ask them to order it. And then maybe they'll order 10 copies, and then you'll be able to read it for free with your tax money. And other people will be able to have access to it as well. If you want to own your own copy because you want to mark it up, then you can please order it from your local mom and pop bookstore. Keep the local businesses going if you can. And if you want to order it with free shipping, then that link there can help you to find a way that might work in your country to get free shipping on the book. Because shipping from Puddle Dancer to places like Germany or India or wherever is extremely expensive. But when people at internationalshopping.com. They buy the things in bulk, so they can afford to mark them up just a little bit and then ship them for free. And then last thing to tell you about is what's going to happen. Well, first, somebody asked in the question, who owns Puddle Dancer Press? It's privately owned by a guy named Meiji Stewart. Maybe he has partners, probably has partners. But Meiji's been publishing nonviolent communication books for 25 years or more.
Yeah,
And
he's actually the publisher of Marshall's books.
Yeah.
Initially, yeah.
Yeah. And yes, thank you, Corey, for reminding me to say that anything that we receive from royalties from our book, we donate back to the Center for Nonviolent Communication, and that total now is up to about $1,200 in royalties, which is really fun. Let's see here. Next week, one of the people that often comes to this class will be playing the role of trainer. It's John Reel. And John's going to be here to support you all in continuing your learning of nonviolent communication next week. John is a certification candidate working with me as his assessor. And so I'm really excited that he has the chance to connect with you all and to offer something and get your feedback. So please come next week so that John's going to be really open to receiving your feedback to sharpen his skills as a trainer as he continues his journey to become a certified trainer. His topic is going to be needs, strategies, and self-judgment. So I put that in the chat, and it'll be at the regular time, and John will be here doing that. We will return the following week, and we'll do part 3 of NVC and Money around vision and aloha. Is that a fresh hand, Jeanette, or is that an old hand that I forgot to put down? Okay, good. All right, so now we come to conclusion of this particular class. I'm going to turn the recording off after everybody says goodbye, and then if you'd like to stick around for what we call the after party, you're more than welcome to do that. Jori makes small groups for people so you can continue to practice empathy and honesty with each other. Thank you so much for your attention and your presence today. It's so much fun for me to be with you all in this weekly community. Appreciate every single word that came out of your mouths to support me in getting more clarity for myself. And it's so nice to look at you on the screen as I get ready to invite you to unmute yourself so you can say a nice chaotic farewell to everybody. Aloha, everybody.
Aloha.
Bye.
Have a nice vacation.
Thank you.